Looking at Japan from a distance, it's easy to think they have it all sorted out. From the first impressions of the lights of Shinjuku, to the beautiful automated toilets, the delicious food, the modern and near-perfect infrastructure, and exceptionally low levels of crime, the list is typically endless. It does seem like the perfect country, doesn't it? However, digging deeper, it's shocking to discover that this supposedly perfect country is actually on a gradually descending flight to a major social and economic crisis, a revelation that even those who visit there for tourism may probably never uncover. So yeah, in the near future, Japan is facing a serious crisis. The yen has fallen against the Turkish lira alongside the Argentine peso, leading to a future of possible currency devaluation. But there are other factors that are pointing towards a gloomy future. But why is that? And where did the Japanese get it so wrong? In the 1980s, Japan was undoubtedly the envy of the world, ranked as the second largest economy globally, just behind the United States. And people believed this was going to be the next trade center of the world, just like we are all touting China at the moment. In other words, the Japanese were rich, very rich. The Japanese economy experienced a massive asset price bubble thanks to the excessive loan growth quota the Bank of Japan dictated on other commercial banks through the policy known as window guidance. During this period, banks in Japan lent money to almost anyone, regardless of the quality of the borrower and if such a person or organization can repay the loan. Although unhealthily, the window guidance policy helped inflate the Japanese economy bubble to unbelievable heights. The people of Japan were truly happy, until the worst happened. The year was 1989 when things soon began to look bad, and the Japanese government needed to deflate the speculations of the possible doom. As a result, the Bank of Japan sharply raised interbank lending rates to keep inflation in check. Unfortunately, what was supposed to be the Messiah policy led to the complete ruin of the Japanese economy. Japanese stock market crashed. Equity and asset prices fell. Banks and insurance companies in Japan were left with books full of bad debt. Bank credit growth also stagnated. The economic bubble that had built up and had a lot of potential eventually burst. The year was 1990, the beginning of a prolonged stagnation and deflation in Japan, popularly called the Lost Decade. But what exactly is the Lost Decade, and what happened during this period? Japan's economic miracle faded completely in 1991. And between then and 2001, they were in real trouble. Many economists argue that Japan was the author of its own doom, particularly because of how it built its economy from scratch. But is this actually true? When Japan's stock market tanked, asset prices also fell, with many big banks that had over-leveraged with speculative investments beginning to close down, and those who could stay slightly above the waters needing to be bailed out by the government. Beyond the banks, several other businesses across various industries folded, and unemployment, believed to be completely eradicated, skyrocketed. Japanese became fearful for the future and sat on their savings instead of spending them. Nothing the government or the Bank of Japan did was working out. The days of miracles are over, and Japan is now facing the reality of their economy. The year is 2001. The Japanese government had instructed the Bank of Japan to inject huge supplies of yen into the markets through quantitative easing, a measure that helped restore considerable stability to the economy. The citizens are gradually spending again, and the country has begun to recover slowly. From 2001 till date, more than 2 decades after, Japan, although much better now, still struggles with the impacts of the lost decade. And far deadlier is the looming economic crisis that awaits Japan due to some of the incidents and impacts of the lost decade. Let's take a quick dive into Japan's education and employment system. Just like Japan has the lost decade, the country also has millions of people who have failed to succeed in society alongside limited or no access to jobs, money, and every other amenity that would help them lead a normal and happy lifestyle. These people, who make up at least 15% of the entire population of Japan, are called the Lost Generation. So yeah, who are the Lost Generation, and what exactly is their story? The job market in Japan is very unique and intense, which makes it quite different from what we have in other job markets in other parts of the world. The story of a professional career in Japan begins with what the Japanese call Shushoku Katsudo, translated in English to job hunting. This is a unique job hunting process, strictly for fresh university graduates at the end of their studies. Many Japanese companies, regardless of their size and status, hire only fresh graduates during their hiring windows, which happens only once a year. Thousands of newly graduated students dressed in black and white suits attend group seminars, studies, presentations, and so on, where these companies select their choice candidates. Thanks to the lifetime employment system widely used in Japan, these fresh graduates lucky to get a job during these yearly job hunting rituals are guaranteed to keep their jobs for several years until retirement. Although very rigid, this system makes it easy for an average Japanese who could get a university education to be sure of getting a job after studies and keeping such a job to fend for his family. And the cycle goes on. The downside of Shishoku Katsudo is that if you don't get a job as a fresh graduate, you may never be opportune to enjoy the lifetime employment culture, as you're left to take on only menial, temporary, part-time, low-paid jobs to fend for yourself. The rejection emails in your inbox within a year could be more than you've ever received in your lifetime. That is how bad it is, but sadly, this was the sad story of the lost generation. During the lost decade in Japan, the economic bubble popped so badly and loudly that several businesses closed their doors, laying off all of their employees as they could no longer support their expenses. Those who struggled to survive stopped hiring, focusing their reserves on their employees only. But during this period, people were still graduating from university. Thousands of students were becoming ready to be introduced into the job market every year throughout the coming dry spell that lasted 10 years. But no one was ready to hire them. This was the lost generation. After Japan survived the economic bloodbath and companies began to employ again, they only focused on fresh graduates, of course. Sadly, none of the people who graduated during the lost decade are still fresh, which automatically means they weren't qualified to launch their corporate careers and enjoy lifelong stability. They had just one shot after university, but sadly, the opportunity for them to take their shots came when there were no goalposts. So yeah, it was already too late for them, and their only fault was being born at the wrong time. Of course, this is a very sad situation for the millions of people who are affected. However, the impacts don't only affect them. Instead, their tragic story negatively affects the entire Japanese society and continues to represent the symbol of Japan's fall from grace and an apparent sign of Japan's disturbing future. There is a whole generation of people in their late 30s and early 40s who are meant to be a part of a working generation, but are isolated from the system. Instead, they are creating a burden to the government. Roughly 17 million people, which is just below 15% of the population in Japan, are considered a part of this generation, and this is the most important age group for the economy of any country. These are the people who spend the most to keep the country's economy engine moving. But in Japan, there might not be enough people who are able to do that. The active workers before the lost decade are retired, or about to retire, and the generations after aren't as developed as they should be. So where does this actually leave the Japanese economy? How would Japan react and handle this hiatus when it eventually hits the roof? Beyond the lost generation, Japan's economy also deals with an even deadlier problem: aging. Japan has the largest population of elderly globally. While this may appear good, it actually burdens the government and consequently the economy of Japan. These people can no longer work and are posing an even greater threat to the economy than the lost generation. They deservedly depend on taxes paid by those who are currently working, called the productive age. But with the lost generation gap, we can only begin to ask how much longer can this be sustainable before the economy begins to crack from the weight of this rapidly aging population. Japan also operates a seniority-based method for calculating wages. While this has been very helpful for several decades, it has increasingly made it difficult for companies to hire elderly people. So even though these people who are supposed to have retired want to continue working to support the economy as much as possible, it's impossible for them to carry on as the wage system only forces them to retire as due. Japan's social welfare costs have begun to increase and are now apparent in the recent budget allocation. Currently, 1/3 of the government spending is allocated to cater to this aging population, which is expected to skyrocket in the coming years. From all indications, the Japanese economy is bottoming out, and the government needs to design and implement multiple economic growth strategies to salvage the situation. Without these proactive measures, the Japanese economy will undoubtedly continue to shrink, leading us to experience another lost decade anytime soon. Easing the immigration restrictions might be a very helpful way forward. However, at the moment this looks like a taboo to Japanese society, as an influx of immigrants might carry a risk of side effects more than the intended benefits. But with the increasing aging population and an already existing generation of people who may not be able to integrate to the Japanese job market, this might be an alternative worth considering. Helping the lost generation get back on their feet and reintegrate into the job market and the thriving society as a whole could also be a very good start. We have now come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel to enjoy more videos like this. Bye for now, and see you in the next one.